final event of the spring series. Our schedule for the fall is still under construction, so please look for email announcements later in the summer to tell you what's coming up for the fall and spring of 2018. And now, last but not least, please silence your cell phones if you have them. And join me in welcoming Craig Brashear and Rebecca Kelly, today's guests of honor and founders of the Rebecca Kelly Ballet.
Well, good afternoon. I'm going to start with a short history, sort of us, and Rebecca will do the art of us. So, I came to New York City in 1975 after graduating from Haverford College with a degree in physics, but a love for performing. Now, Rebecca came a few years before myself, and she's one of the loft pioneers of SoHo. She was in a restaurant named Food on the corner of Worcester and Prince when she saw a sign advertising lofts for rent. Now, she had a 2-bedroom apartment in the West Village and thought, oh, that's too small. So 2,500 square feet, empty. She and 3 other aspiring dancers built it out, made a dance studio and a place to live. Rebecca had been dancing with Charles Weidman, but both of us were freelancing in the downtown loft dance scene and performances. Rebecca, the young choreographer, and I, one of her dancers. And that's how we really got to know each other. I knew of her in college, but it was in the city that we really became involved. We formed a modern dance company, Rebecca Kelly Dance, in 1979. And in December of that year, we got married. And we also, in addition to doing the dances, had a series of salons ourselves back in the early 80s, and we had poets and filmmakers and musicians. And so we see that we're participating in something that's an old tradition here in SoHo. But in the 80s and 90s, we toured nationally, Boston, Washington, D.C., Minneapolis, New York, and performed at the original Dance Theater Workshop, Symphony Space, the Joyce Theater, and the 92nd Street Y. We also did some international touring to France, Germany, Austria, and even Poland. But even during that time, we continued our impromptu street performances in SoHo, which we had started when we were first here, as well as being in part of summer lunch performances that were sponsored by Chase Bank and the World Trade Center. And that's what these photos cover. You recognize Vesuvio. Rebecca as Charlie Chaplin. Here we're busking just down the street on West Broadway. And Chase used this to advertise the street performances, and here we are at the World Trade Center.
What year?
That was about 86. We pick up where I left off. In 1987, we began a 30-year association with the Adirondack Mountain area in upstate New York. And we implemented a program called Onstage, an outreach performance program for rural youth and a choreographic residency. We've been there every summer since 1987. That's 30 plus years. And we've reached thousands of children and families over the years and involved us deeply in the lives of upstate New Yorkers. Here a little bit, that's backstage, working on a piece called A Delicate Balance, which was about endangered species. And I work with younger children. Be more about the company through Rebecca's. And the dancers, of course, enjoyed themselves a lot while they were there. Okay. In 1991, we had our daughter Hillary, who's here. She has pink hair. And we retired from dancing in 1992. Hillary inspired us to create Kids Commotion, a neighborhood dance program which is a child development approach to dance with the child and caregiver participating in classes together. And I adapted that program for special needs children and have taught movement at the Stanley Lamb Preschool in Brooklyn for the past 22 years. Rebecca also established a neighborhood dance program for middle school and teens in SoHo, offering classes from dance basics and a choreography workshop to a teen company, and even a program for a while we called Ballet for Soccer Boys. Now we, from that, developed the December Nutcracker Highlights, an annual community event which showcased Rebecca's classical solos and duets from the Holiday Ballet in an intimate SoHo studio setting, as our professional dancers were invited as guest stars in regional productions. This is the end of it with the tray of sweets, which the children always enjoy. In 2008, our foundation, Appleby, purchased a 100-plus-year-old building in a small upstate town called Ausable Forks with the intention of rehabilitating it to a vibrant cultural center. This is it when we were considering buying it. And this is after a lot of renovations. We restored that closed storefront. And so to carry on with the story of the art, here's Rebecca Kelly.
So I'm a choreographer, and I make contemporary ballets. Though my dancers are classically trained, the sensibility is entirely contemporary. I'm going to talk to you today about how I do my work. The creation of a ballet, for me anyway, is a recognition factor. When I'm working on a dance, it seems as if it's already there, and all I have to do is reveal the shape of that dance to you so you can see it as a dance. But it's been on the back burner of my mind for a long time before I even begin to work with the dancers in the studio. I have no desire to be inscrutable. I want to share my ideas, and I'm looking to draw you in. So you'll always find that my dances are about something, and you could say what that something is. I see life in terms of motion, and I read bodies in a particular way, but the quest is, can I interpret the body in such a way that it is recognized by others for what it's going through? So that's my challenge. And then it raises questions, and I have to ponder, what is the shape and action that characterizes a feeling or an idea? What is the energy of frustration? How do I suggest the power of the moon over the tides? What makes a jeté, a leap? Not just a jeté, but an expression of freedom or escape. What are the rhythms that describe the energy of water? What is the movement of sorrow, the action of despair, the steps of love? And in consideration of these and many other questions, I create a dance. Here's something that I think about. You are who you are all the time. One's expression through one's art is an extension of who you are, how you think, and of what you want to dwell on or share. So, going back, first, how did my background set me on a path of choreography? What was formative for me? Well, I would say my family and my childhood. I grew up in the Sudan, in Khartoum. The Sahara Desert was a big event. The Blue Nile, the poverty, and the drought were indelible in my mind. And then there were my formative years of dance training with the Washington Ballet, and then later with modern dance pioneer Charles Wiseman. And then there was the desire to write stories in Bryn Mawr College. And then there was meeting Craig, my dance partner and my life partner. We had the privilege of raising our daughter, Hillary, in SoHo, and then there was the development of our company throughout these many years in SoHo, where we found a place we could create for children, for adults, for professional development, and for my own artistic vision. Our ability to remain in the ever-changing and sort of ruthless and risky business of dance in SoHo has been a privilege. And finally, there is this wonderful contrast in our lives of urban New York City and wilderness, the Adirondacks. I'm often asked, where do the ideas come from behind my dances? How does one transform the pattern and the arrangement of motion into communication and beauty? Well, it starts with imagining. And maybe it is this imagining from everyday life, from reaching across barriers, for experiencing empathy, It just makes you want to do something. And for me, I want to do dances. So a big part of making a dance is simply how I process what concerns me. And these days, what I find has concerned me for 20 years and onward are social issues which include alcoholism, refugees, climate change, feminism, and about water and plastic. I like to transform abstract ideas into movement and form, and I like to change literal ideas into abstraction, so it flows back and forth. And then there's the individuality of my dancers. They are constantly amazing to me. Another big part of making dance is responding to music. And so I have these thoughts about music. I have to know my music so intimately, note for note, rhythm and flow, so that I can get inside it or get in front of it, so that the movement appears to have generated the music itself. And knowing the music, not just making a picture of the music or carrying out movements to a song, but responding to its evocativeness, gives you the chance to interpret its signposts and its meaningful, how it affects you as meaningful symbols that others can project and feel for themselves. Silence is equally important, but active listening is the key. And the other major part about making a dance, of course, is motivating the dancers. It's like anticipating a trip. Have you felt at the advent of a trip both excited and calm, motivated and decisive, but also wondering where and when the arrival point will be? The calmness and the decisiveness, for me, is necessary for steering my trip with clarity. But the not knowing leaves you open to the dancer's response, because the dancers are the muse, and they are very astute, and they are the very first audience. And if they are inspired, you, the choreographer, is fairly safe, because they will deliver the work to the public. You depend upon them, and it's humbling. Today, Craig and I divided my ballets into categories, and after 40 years and well over 100 dances, we have so many images that was a big challenge. And because my dances always cross over from one category to another, from abstract to emotion, or from form to feeling, the one thing they have in common is they are driven by this passion to make a dance, to see what unfolds. Movement implies impulse, and emotion implies a scenario. The performance expresses the humanity of a dancer, and these three things together make a ballet for me. So how to transform the patterns and the impulses of emotion into communication, that's what's on the back burner all the time for me. When I'm in the shower, when I'm walking down the street, there's a dance, cooking. But first I want to show you some categories. And then we'll talk more about what happens inside those categories. I make dances, I think, initially that give shape to an emotion or a singular state. A dance in a ballet such as Desire or Turbulence or Tenderness of Wolves. Some of my ballets have a story content. Dream Driven is about an alcoholic. Those Who Must Be Kept is about the codependence of people, and it's about vampires. And I have an autobiographical ballet called Mad Dogs and Diplomats. I have made many ballets on an environmental theme. Among those are Wilderness, Yellowstone, A Delicate Balance, Soft Moon, and Adirondack Elemental, which we'll be performing very shortly, and also Cascade, a recent one. And I make ballets that are abstract, and these focus on the purity of form and line, the grace and energy of the dancer. It's about what the dancers can do, and it's represented by dances like A Fine Line of True Togetherness and drums. And then there are the dances that simply celebrate the exuberance of the human spirit, dances like Clarion and Filigree and Spice Sweet. So I'm going to describe the path of creation of just a few dances. Each ballet originates in a different way, and sometimes you never know what the catalyst for the dance is going to be. In a ballet called Turbulence and Desire, the very words were the catalyst. Turbulence emerged from my fear of flying, which happened after 9/11. Before that, I flew a lot. I had a very long time to think about turbulence on a flight back from Spain to the US. I imagined an array of experiences expressed in terms of awkward shapes and movement. And this process also, as I thought my way through my 6 or 7 hour flight, where does turbulence take you? It takes you from one state into another state. And so my dance became about turbulence and friction and calm. So that was a dance from an airplane flight. The next group of slides is going to show you several different dances. These are turbulence with the beautiful, awkward Georgia. A linear shape. This is Therese. This is Nile and Robin. This dance is Tenderness of Wolves. It's about a very unhappy relationship that I knew of with some people I love dearly. It's angry. This is the ballet Carmen, the traditional story but told from the perspective of the crime of passion fellow who's in prison. This was my final result of 9/11. It's the dark side and the hope expressed in America after 9/11. In a ballet like Desire, where again the word set me on my path, you see individuals who struggle with and because of their desires, which are ill-timed, unrequited, or just mismatched. In watching that ballet, you would recognize movements and shapes I've given to wanting, to danger, to trembling, to fury, to regret, and the eloquence that desire kindles in us. This is the lovely Georgia. She's here. The soul. A composer with whom I collaborated on in a dance called Those Who Must Be Kept was about vampires. He once said, everybody loves a story. And it's true. So next you're going to see a few images from some of my satires, like Ladies in Waiting. This was subtitled Short Stories on the Subject of Impatience. And it was inspired in 5 parts, all about things women wait for, like a promotion in the business place, or in line for the bathroom at Lincoln Center, or waiting for Mr. Wonderful, or waiting for an interminable pregnancy to be over. And there's also a glimpse of my social commentary on a work called La Belle and Le Bad Boy, which is really about a neat and tidy, organized female and a guy with ADHD. Tidy and kind of distracted by his earphones. Okay. There's the, this was having read The Handmaid's Tale in 1987. I thought I would do something about that. Then, Waiting for Mr. Wonderful. Here's Craig and me. And another version in later years. Mad Dogs and Diplomats. Here's the diplomats at the side of the pool. This is Dream Driven, about the woman alcoholic who had many guises. This is First Light, and this is about sudden death. This was during the AIDS. This is Those Who Must Be Kept, the vampires. The narrative ballets Dispossessed and Long Time Passing were stories created in response to world events. I'd heard a story on NPR about an Ethiopian woman seeking refuge in the United States and her harrowing trip through South America up through and across the Rio Grande River into Texas. This ballet stemmed from thoughts about our global future, about our changing environment, our children, and about the enormous challenge of assimilation. It also brought me right back to an alienated period in my early years in Khartoum, Sudan, where I was the only white girl in my school. I was the only person of age 11 who was not betrothed. I did not speak Arabic, and I was not a Muslim. But I loved living in the Sudan. This was crossing the Rio Grande. And now they've arrived in America. Long Time Passing, another ballet, reflects upon war, loss, and the people who are left behind. I was receiving letters from Nolan Albarelli. He was the brother of one of my dancers, and he was serving in Iraq in 2007. Lieutenant Albarelli was a bomb expert. As I developed the ballet, we were so anxiously waiting to hear that he had just returned home safely. We wouldn't know this for weeks. So that was the background of the creation of this ballet. He wrote to me extensively and eloquently about the war, and in one letter about the grave need to replace the vehicles which were more blast resistant than the Army-supplied Humvees. It disturbed me so much that I sent a copy of that letter to a friend in DC who forwarded it to journalist Daniel Shore. On July 12th, Shore read parts of that letter on NPR, reaching over 1 million people. Nolan did return safely home to the US. He received a Bronze Star. He even took a bow with the company at the premiere of Long Time Passing at the Gerald Lynch Theater. And those Army vehicles began to be made with improved protection. Here's a look of the rehearsal of Long Time Passing to show how we took a real situation and made a ballet out of life and emotion. Nolan said these costumes look a lot more comfortable than the Army gear that he was given. Rebecca Kelly Ballet is also well known for its environmental ballets. In 1987, the artistic director of the Lake Placid Center for the Arts was in our audience at Symphony Space. He was intrigued with Dream Driven, that I would make a story, a complex story about an alcoholic. He invited us to come up to the Adirondacks for a creative residency, and he hoped that it would inspire a ballet. Little did he know. We thought it sounded just great. By all means, let's get out of New York in the summer. We fell in love with that place of mountains, rivers, lakes, wild raspberries, white birch, and butterflies. And we came out of our intense urban experience into an equally intense experience of nature. Over 3 decades, some of my most important ballets have reflected on the natural environment, its fragility and its resilience, the need for stewardship, and taking responsibility for our wasteful behaviors. This is Apayana, which we'll be doing on June 4th at City Center Studios. This is about the changing patterns of butterflies, waters, air. This is Adirondack Elemental. I'm just taking the single notion of what I love about it and making a ballet. This is also air. This is earth. And you will see the latest version of Adirondack Elemental on June 4th if you join us at City Center Studios. This is snow, brand new. This is air. This is a ballet called Boundaries. It is about our shrinking borders due to our heavy footprint. This is Wilderness, done to Richard Adler's Wilderness Suite. And this is Cascade, about water. Where does it come from? Where does it go? How does it change? Tear of the Clouds was a ballet born in 1989. It was the very first of all of my environmental ballets. The name derives from the headwaters of the Hudson River. This was a unique multimedia collaboration with photographer Mark Sedan, painter and costume designer Donna Marxer, and Mac and Margot Fish, on whose property on Lake Placid the photographic images were taken and were later used as a background. We thought it was about the death of white birches in the Adirondacks when we made the ballet, but through many performances over the years, we began to understand it was really a requiem for the death of forests worldwide. And now we arrive at the abstract ideas, where shapes and forms become movement and where literal ideas become abstract. The ballets which reflect on the human condition and our place in the world will always be the most absorbing to me. But who was it who said, the world is sometimes too much with us? Sometimes it's a relief and a joy just to explore what a dancer can do, just the shapes and the adventure of seeing what they can do, the endless possibilities. I'm going to tell you about a fine line of true togetherness. It's an abstract dance. So let me show you some pictures before I show you a fine line. So who knew what a nat dancer would do inside a bundle of cloth? That dance has become snow. That cloth has become snow. A fine line of true togetherness is an abstract dance with a curious origin. This one was born out of, well, strife from within the company, internal confusion. It was created in 2005, and it was wishful thinking and a lot of irony that I named the dance A Fine Line of True Togetherness. And none of the dancers at the time ever asked me why it was called that. I felt I was walking a fine line with my company and wondered how to continue into my summer season with the difficult personnel issues that had arisen. They definitely weren't together. So it seemed wisest just to go with neutral shapes and sculpture and energy in 5 dances. I made up completely arbitrary rules about how I would make the dance and use the number 5, and I followed my rules, and the result was a striking, linear, very stylish dance called A Fine Line of True Togetherness. One of the rules was I had to use a diagonal in many different ways. So you could be very arbitrary with making a dance. I'm going to conclude with just a few more thoughts. I want to say, when you watch a ballet, sometimes you have to permit yourself to be bewildered. That very state can open a door into meaning. And while dance can give shape to emotions, it might even help one be in touch with one's emotions and recognize all that is there. But dance is so ephemeral. The portal for visibility is fleeting. You cannot repeat the moment. You can't have it. You can't hold it. You can't take it home with you, except in your mind. So the very act of watching a ballet, and especially a live performance, is a rare and very personal experience. It's more like a living dream. Finally, what makes dance art? And who's to judge? Perhaps it is only for the beholder to say. Is it that awe-inspiring movement? Is it that thrill of understanding and connection that, without the confounding use of words that always divides and misdirects us, is it that special moment of comprehension? Havelock Ellis, who was an English physician, a writer and intellectual living in the 1900s, he said, "Dancing is the loftiest, most moving, and most beautiful of the arts because it is not mere translation or abstraction from life. It is life itself."